For our talk this evening, we welcome Mathew Barnes. He's an artist and design director living in Oakland, California. He has 25 years of experience of agency, entrepreneurial, and in-house experience with a focus on scaling teams, building brand systems, and defining best practices. He currently leads the Tanzu brand team at VMware, and he will dive in and discuss on key tactics and practical takeaways to help teams clear out the noise, if you will, and focus on building better brand experiences. And there will be a Q&A after Matthew's presentation, so please have those questions ready towards the end, and Chris will make sure to capture those towards the end of the talk. So again, thanks everyone for your time, and without further ado, here's Mathew Barnes.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the intro, Donna. Chris, thank you so much for allowing me to come here and present. I look forward to sharing. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Cool. Can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up? Yes, no, maybe so. Cool. Word. All right, so let's get into this. I'll go ahead and start. That's not a photo of me. Obviously, that's my cat. I figured it was a bit more interesting than seeing a photo of me. I'm Mathew. First of all, let me introduce Audrey. Audrey is one of our cats. That photo is essentially her personality. That is like her favorite spot wrapped around the leg of our dining room chair. She'll do that and just will follow you with her eyes. Anyway, I am an artist, designer, as Donna mentioned. I live in Oakland, California. I was born and raised in Missouri, spent time in Texas, lived in the Bay Area for about 7 years now. Here with my wife. My wife is also a creative director. She works at Meta on the AI team there. So we do a lot of collaboration and sharing resources. And so, yeah, a lot of my influences and inspiration comes from her and vice versa. So throughout my career, like I started out in production side, went to the agency, and that's where I really discovered my passion for web and just like post storytelling. Did that for a year and then broke off and started my own small boutique and did that for about a decade. I mostly focused on nonprofits, did a lot of corporate entities in the entertainment space. For the past several years, I've spent a lot of time at a variety of different startups and mid-sized and big organizations in the Bay Area, from AppDirect, Singular to AWS, and now I'm at VMware. And the one thing about all those roles, I had the opportunity to really, build out a team, implement different design systems, and failed a lot, and so like I learned from those failures, and each new opportunity, I'm able to take what I learned and implement it and help it grow and everything. And I'm still learning. And so like what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover so just some high level, top level principles of how I approach the design process. So I'm going to get into the introduction, get into the design process, and then talk about optimization, my approach, which is more of a high level use case, touching more on principles rather than the actual tactical. As designers on the call, you all have your own process. You have the way that you get things done. And so I don't want to come in here and say, do it this way. This is the best way. This is my approach. And I'm hoping that you can get some nuggets to implement in your day-to-day. And then we'll end it with some final takeaways. So anyway, let's go ahead and start. I typically start any talk or any presentation with this quote. And this quote essentially has been with me throughout the course of my career. And I'll go ahead and read it. The goal of designer is to listen, observe, understand, sympathize, empathize, synthesize, and glean insights that enable her to make the invisible visible. That last part, make the invisible visible, is pretty powerful, and it resonates in a lot of different ways. You can look at it as it relates to an amazing brand experience. A great brand experience is invisible. A great product experience is invisible. A great in-person experience is invisible because like you're expecting the good results of that experience. And a lot of times when we do work with stakeholders or we work with our customers, they're only interested in the A and the B, that project kickoff and then that ship. And that's important. They have this need for a problem and we need to solve it. and we want a solution. But what's equally important is how we actually get there, which is the process, which is the invisible. Now, how do we make that invisible visible? We have to go back and pull out the hood. So let's look at it from a 30,000-foot view. Doesn't matter what size the scale of an organization, projects come in like hot arrows, from teams you didn't know exist. Each group presents their project as is a top priority or OKR, or whatever business goal, business need. And to be fair, all that's important and it's essential. However, the questions that we need to uncover is it a priority for the business? Is it a critical need for the customers? These things that we should uncover before a project moves into Jira, Workflow, or Asana. Just from my past experience, a lot of times we'll get projects that will come into the queues like, hey, this is a project that we need to have a kickoff, and we have that call, and it's 20 people in that call, and we're having fluid discussions about a project that's not even a project just yet. And then what happens is the call ends, 2 weeks go by, and we don't hear anything else, and it kind of falls off the radar, and then it kicks back up, and we go through this whole process over again. And so I like to pull back and get a sense of what are we doing, why are we doing it, and how are we going to get it done, which is uncovering those details. And so that foundation is that what, who, and how. Again, what are we doing, who are we doing it for, and how are we going to get it done? All of this discovery leads up to that one big opportunity. And what are those opportunities? Those opportunities can be an opportunity for an individual to step up into a leadership role, those team dynamics. We can define a new strategy that can actually scale the company to different directions. Uncovering that big idea, what is that big idea? And sometimes those opportunities present itself when you're trying to filter out. And then solving for the business. You got to make sure that you're solving for the business, because at the end of the day, it's making sure that we get things to our customer that's going to work in a good way. So all these key elements are important to getting to that customer experience. So what is the process for discovering those opportunities? So that's where we get into the design process. Now, I'm not going to spend time here because as designers, you're familiar with all these steps. It's how we collaborate, it's how we debate, it's how we solve problems. Design process is fluid, is evolving, is ongoing, and it can be uniquely yours. Now I modified my process again, as I mentioned early on, multiple times over the last couple of decades, and we'll probably get again, because each experience or each project requires a certain level of flexibility, and that's what's so amazing about design. It's not as linear. We can actually flex it and bend it and move it in a way that helps us get to that solution. So for this presentation, I want to focus on my approach that views the process holistically and identifies 3 phases to help teams focus on what really matters. So let's get right into it. Now, my 3-phase approach starts off with very basics. That first phase is setting the foundation. The second phase is followed up by sharing the problem. And then phase 3 is proving the work. Now, when you put it all together, this is how it is framed. It is still following the system of the design process. However, I'm going a step higher and looking at it holistically and try to simplify so that we can really focus in and clear out all this unnecessary noise. So let's get right into the first phase, which is setting the foundation. Now, this phase, really focuses on the discovery session. It identifies the goals and outcome, again, the what, the who, how, and action. And then again, setting those expectations of, team alignment, decision makers, getting as granular as who needs to be included in meetings versus Slack or email updates. And that's another common trend. Again, from my past experience, a lot of times we have a lot of people sitting in meetings and no one really understands who owns what, who's the decision maker, who also needs to be included in these meetings. And so we use the discovery session to really knock down and get a sense of, and get it really focused of, okay, this is the team that's going to get this problem across the goal line. Everyone else is included for visibility so that we can keep our meetings and our communications really focus. And then also, what is that meeting cadence? Like, do we need to have weekly updates, bi-weekly updates, monthly, daily, however one need to do this? So like setting those expectations at the beginning really helps set the foundation for getting the work done. And then creating advocates. I think this is probably just as important, because at the end of the day, we all are partners and we're on this journey together. And sometimes you have to remind teams that we are a partnership. It's not a service. We are a partnership. We are doing this together. So I try to get teams to understand that early on before we really dive into discovering what we're actually getting done. So I'm going to go ahead and focus on, like, I'm doing these use cases a little different. Like, I pulled out some of the names so that I can share a little bit, but it's still high level because I want to focus mostly on the strategy side and just some of the thinking, as opposed to the actual tactical design work. So let's see this in action. This is one task. I was a creative director at a new organization. I think it was like my first month. And I was hired to lead an end-to-end brand refresh. And there were a whole host of challenges facing. I was new to the industry. I inherited a team that had low morale, and we had no data stream. We couldn't even understand what was working and what wasn't working. So we went through our marketing planning session and defined our overarching goals. And then I went in and wanted to focus on the people side of it. And so just going back to the actual project goals. So like from that planning session, we approached the project as an opportunity to resolve three main pain points: proven brand awareness, develop a scalable brand system, and increase pipeline. Increase pipeline is this common theme in a lot of organizations because the website is key to success of that revenue. So that's one of the elements that we want to focus in on. But before we could get into any project or any type of tactical aspect of it, we had to first discover ourselves. Again, as I mentioned, I was new to the organization. The team had low morale, but building that trust, trying to get an understanding of who we are and who we want to be, because at the core of all this work, there are humans, and being an empathetic and supportive leader is a key trait for building and scaling a team. And so what we did was we spent an entire day sharing inspiration. We did some mind mapping. We defined our personal design principles, our communication styles, and how we wanted to be perceived. I rented a space in Oakland through the company and had the design team come in, and we had all types of exercises. And so this was like, I kind of miss this now because, now everything's remote. You hardly get a chance to actually have this interaction. But we did spend a day sharing inspiration and really trying to get a sense of where we wanted the brand to be. And we were thinking pie in the sky, no rules, great opportunity just to share as much as you want. So why does this really matter? Because before you can solve for the customer, you must solve for each other. And I really try to preach this in my teams and just leadership style in general. In order for us to truly service our customers or the business, we have to make sure that we're taking care of each other, and not just like from an empathetic, but more from just leaders. I think all of us have that ability and opportunity to lead. And so making sure that we're looking at each other as partners and doing all the things we can to get things across the finish line. And so the key takeaways from that particular exercise was I wanted to really discover, who we wanted to be, what was important, and why does it matter. And once we got past that point of understanding our internal objectives and getting a sense of how our working style and how we would work together, then we can actually go into sharing the problem. But now we can actually start doing the creative work and understanding what the customer needs or what the needs of the brief, et cetera. Again, so I'm going to jump around a little bit with this use case. I kind of picked and pulled different parts just so that it's applicable for what I was discussing. So like the whole sharing a problem, this is where the work is done. We leverage the data, the internal knowledge, iterate in designs, and we fail fast. Like I'm a really big believer in, pushing out as much as you can and testing, seeing how it's working, and then iterate on top of that instead of spending a ton of time trying to get that perfect solution, because there's no such thing as that perfect solution. So, collectively formulating a problem to begin the process of solving. That's what we're doing, sharing that problem. And again, that phase consists of the research, the ideation, the iteration. And the first activity is to listen first. And what I mean by that is, sorry about that. This phase, it starts with the listen first, it's the data story, and then it's the collaboration. And so let's get into another use case, which is another branch workshop that I did on the same project. And as we start off, the most important of the process is not doing anything at all. Listening first allows you to understand the problem, hear others' ideas and perspective, time the process, and provide useful insights. Like, there's a lot of times I'll sit in a kickoff meeting or a meeting in general, and I might not even say anything. I might not contribute anything. I'm taking notes. I'm really listening to others' insights and others trying to get a sense of what's resonating and what is that actual problem. And then I'll follow up with just some general thoughts. Or if I have some revelation towards the end of the meeting, I'll definitely chime in. But I really like to listen and allow others to get their ideas across, their fresh perspectives, so that we can actually start to collectively work together. So that's the one thing I always encourage people to do, is if you go into a meeting, especially if you're new to an organization, the first thing to do is just to listen first, to get a sense of what is everyone else thinking, and how can we actually solve this problem. And then once you have that time to process, that's when you get to the what and the why, the data story. The data tells you that, what is happening or not happening, and why is it happening. And so for this particular use case, we knew that we didn't have a consistent data stream. And so the first thing we wanted to do, we needed to implement some type of tracking system. And we had to wait, because in order to get that data back, you have to kind of allow it to nurture a bit. So what we learned from is users want to learn more, but stop short of requesting demos or creating a free account. And so we looked at all the different metrics to try to determine what is the next course of actions. We did develop our key metrics and baselines to build, and just to give us a sense of, and I think we set some low bar as far as what we wanted those metrics to be, so that we can have a quick win. And then once we uncover all those technical metrics and baseline elements, then we can actually start building that plan. And that's when the trust is built. We uncovered the what. Now we can actually put the process in place. And that's when we get into Asana and start to build out all the different touch points. And the reason is because, we all want to make sure that everyone's going on this journey together. The challenge is, the last couple of years has been super tough on teams, working remote, not really having an opportunity to do some really thorough collaboration. So how do you bring people along on the journey? And so just recently, our team at VMware did a really extensive brainstorming workshop session to come up with branding for a particular event. And we spent a great deal of the day, the entire team in Miro, adding in inspiration, writing notes, and it can be inspiration from all cross channels and industries, just to get a sense of what's resonating with other people. And so I use Miro. I'm a big fan of Miro because it allows you to collaborate, share ideas, present to stakeholders, track live feedback, group into big ideals, just to come up with that one big thing. Also, the one thing that I do is whenever I'm putting together creative inspiration mood boards, I always like to present those mood boards to stakeholders just to get a sense of what's resonating. And if there's one particular theme that's resonating, then I'll start going in that direction as far as we're going to start developing concepts. But I do open the workshops to the entire team because I go outside design. I even include engineers so that we can get different perspectives and viewpoints. And I have everyone sort, categorize, and then just to help with the overall visual narrative. So the key takeaway from that particular session is we want creative problem solving requires, at times, creators to be vulnerable. As leaders, again, it's important that there's a safe place for transparency, And also don't forget to celebrate those wins. And so having that transparent, safe place to share ideas, and then also celebrating those ideas and allowing people to have that voice is something great when you're doing that creative process. And then it's also finally proving the work. And this is really just a quote as the key to great ideas is executing them. And what that means is you can have all the great ideas in the world, but if you don't get to an actual execution, if you don't get to the actual plan, then things start falling apart. So by flexing and extending the brand or design system across teams and channels, testing and iterating from the results, evangelizing retrospectives with teams to uncover opportunities for growth, and then also planning those next phase. And so this is where you can really get the sense of how things are resonating with teams or with customers by testing. We do a ton of testing. Like I've done some with user testing. I've done some live focus groups just to see what's resonating. And then we'll circle back and make some iterations, make some changes. And in some instances, we have to start from the beginning again because it was a mess. And so I'm not at all concerned about starting over or even recognizing that, hey, we didn't necessarily hit the mark on this, because it's an opportunity to grow and to learn. I know a lot of creative leaders will try to look for, why did it happen? It's like, okay, we can focus on why it happened at another time. Let's focus on iterating and getting the next version out there. We'll definitely have opportunities to learn from our mistakes, but let's focus on solving for that win. And so all these different use cases, there was a variety of different data points that we received. And as I mentioned, we done some variety of various surveys and tools. We uncovered both positive and some feedback that required us to address. And here is just some of the sample size. And so we increased team efficiency and cadence. The morale actually was an uptick in the morale. We sent out some internal surveys to the team, and there was definitely an uptick. We had positive brand affinity. We shared it with our customers at in-person events, and there was a lot of positive affinity. There's an uptick in traffic and pipeline. Now we had like this single source of tracking embedded in our code. And then we were able to track conversions attributed to the website. And so there was a lot of different results that came from all this process. But again, when you think about like just building those frameworks and processes, look at it holistically, try to get a sense of spend your time nurturing your people, really developing the internal team and mindset, and then really getting to the meat of what all it needs to be. And so like the final takeaways, but again, like what I did was, instead of listing a ton of different things, I wanted to focus in on what I thought was important in each part of these phases, starting with setting the foundation, discovering who we want to be and why it's important and why it doesn't matter. The goal is to build that trust with the team. And once you build that trust, then you get into uncovering, what that project is, the what, the who, and the how. The second phase is sharing the problem, providing a safe place, to be transparent and to celebrate those ideas, and that's really important. And then also finally proving the work, and executing on those ideas, and evangelizing, testing the work, and most of all, celebrating a win with your team, because like realistically, y'all, what we do is really fun, and it shouldn't be taken seriously. Like we have a lot of fun with this. We spend time with our friends, and we're able to do some meaningful work and provide a service. And so with that, I will pause there and see if anybody have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matthew. So Chris is going to be taking your questions. So if anyone has questions, feel free to put them on our chat and Chris will take them.
No questions? You want to know about my cat?
All right,
I
we've
have two
got one
cats.
from Calvin Lardy. What inspired you to go into interaction design?
Oh, good question. Going back to the quote, Hillman Curtis. Hillman Curtis was like, if you're not familiar with him, do some research. Hillman Curtis was a pioneer in motion design or motion graphics right when Flash was macromedia and becoming a thing. And I started out in design and I thought I was going to be more traditional advertising and just your traditional design. And I stumbled upon his website and saw things move and saw this opportunity to tell stories through visual interaction. And that just inspired me. And so I started following his career, patterning my career after his. And so like he was doing Flash. So I jumped heavy into Flash, was doing some action scripting and thought I was going to be an animator. And then he moved into web. And so I moved into web, taught myself HTML. And then I started working at an agency, a digital agency that did nothing but web. And it was old school where we were designing everything in Photoshop, slicing things up, putting things in a document and label them and handing a physical print document to a developer. And then also like I was building sites, nested tables, everything that's bad. So that's got me into that. And then he actually went into film and then I started to dabble in there. And there was a point in my career where I was going to quit design and go to film school because like I was just trying to follow Hillman Curtis because like he was my idol. But obviously I didn't do that. But yeah, that's how I got into it.
Thank you. Next question is from Priscilla. How do you help hybrid teams feel connected with each other without relying too much on Zoom meetings and force games?
And that's a good question. We struggle with that now. My team is 13, and we have a lot of meetings, and so I try to make it a point to my leads to get people breaks. No one wants to sit on a Zoom call all day, and so I try to keep things light. Like if we have our stand-ups, I always try to keep it light and try to keep things really quick as possible. Get people on and off. And nobody really wants to do any Zoom happy hours. No one has the bandwidth to do like, hey, Friday fun day. Nobody wants to do any of that. And so I try to sprinkle that in. And the team does a good job of trying to sprinkle in fun activities throughout the course of the day. Like we have our Slack channel that will share funny memes and everything. But I typically try to keep things light. Like even if we're in a serious meeting, I try to dial it back a bit because again, it is not that serious. And again, people are stretched all over the globe. And so I want to make sure that everyone's feeling connected. But it is a challenge. I don't think anybody has perfected it. And so it's something that I'm constantly working on.
Question from Jules. What sparked the evolution of your current optimization process, and how do you see it continuing to evolve?
Great question. Like what sparked is I've probably sat in hundreds of kickoff meetings, and it's always the same. Well, for me, I don't know what it is for everyone else. It's just my own personal experience. Again, it starts off where I'm on a call or sitting in a conference room with everybody. I got like all designers, you got product marketers, you got product designers, product man, you got everybody in the call. And realistically, it only should be like 4 people in that call, but everybody's included. And what I found was time and time again, we'll have these conversations and we're whiteboarding, we're planning all of this, and then no one knows who's responsible for the next steps. And so what was happening, we would leave, a few weeks go by, and then an email will come across. And it's like, hey, what's the status? It's like, status of what? And so over time, what I try to do was um, try to have quick meetings before I got into that kickoff. Like if a kickoff call landed on my calendar, I would schedule a quick stand up 10-minute conversation with that stakeholder just to get a sense of, hey, what's the goal of this kickoff meeting? Who needs to be included in this call? And then from there, that's when I just started optimizing all the different portions of the process just to make it a bit more streamlined. And it goes back to Zoom exhausting. I don't know what the word is, but Zoom fatigue. It goes back to Zoom fatigue. If you're constantly having your entire team sitting on all the calls, over a period of time, people get burnt out. And so the goal is to try to uncover as much as possible before we even get there, so that the key people that need to be included in those calls and those meetings, are included. And so that's why I try to spend, like even with my team, I try to spend most of my time focusing on like our strategy and how we're going to approach, a particular project, so that the team is not burnt out. They're doing what they enjoy and they're getting the opportunity to lead. And my goal is just to be a resource for them.
All right. I'm sorry if I pronounced this name wrong. From Jaja. Love the principles approach, but do you have any favorite design system platforms, DAM, MAM, or workflow solution recommendations?
Huh. Another good question. I probably won't be able to answer that because like my team typically manage that. Um, yeah, that's probably not a good question for me. But you know what? I can check with my team and see who we're using, and I can follow up with you.
All right. And from Nelma, how can UX help bridge product development and brand experience within a small organization?
And that's another great question. I'm a big advocate because like, my background is brand. I've been brand my entire career. However, I've studied UX principles, and I apply a lot of those principles throughout how I work. I think product and brand go hand in hand, just because to me, product really looks at project holistically and tries to get a sense of what's going to be good for the customer, what's going to be good for that user, like how we're going to solve that problem, that specific problem. Brand sometimes tends to overlook a lot of things and focus mostly on the aesthetics, and then what's that going to be, how can we make this look as best as it can and perform well. But I think if I were leading a giant design org, I would have my product designers and brand designers all sit together, because I think we're missing a lot of opportunities for collaboration, because like most places that I work, this has been in two different orgs and there's not a lot of crossover at all. And so like from a smaller org, if you have that opportunity to collaborate with your brand designers and vice versa, I would encourage that. I would set up weekly or bi-weekly cadence just to have visibility into what products you're working or what projects you're working on, and see if there's opportunities to collaborate on different things. And but I am a firm believer in those two teams working closely together, because like I do think those principles are aligned. However, brand could learn from product designers could learn from brand designers, and I think that overall you'll have a more seamless experience across all channels and touch points. Because again, there's a lot of times like you'll see an amazing product, but the brand doesn't look that great, and vice versa. So yeah.
All right. And last question from Imelda. Curious why you are not using FigJam to document notes about your projects.
Ooh. You know what? I am a big fan of Figma. I love it. And the reason we don't use FigJam, because most of the organizations that I work are slow adopters to Figma. When you have an organization that's like, 30, 40,000 individuals, it takes a process of getting things, documented. Like I can mention this, I work at AWS. I think they just started using Figma, if I can remember. But yeah, we use Miro just because like it's a company tool. So, but yeah, I love Figma.
All right. From Priscilla, how have you measured outcomes for being more inclusive and diverse within your design teams and across teams with clients? Pondering lately about how to prove and show the incremental improvements by being more diverse and inclusive, although everyone knows it's the goal.
Yeah, and that's a good question. That's a tough question too. We do a lot of surveys. We have another team that handles a lot of our data retrieval, as far as like if we're trying to get a pulse of what's resonating. And so what we normally do is come up with a set of questions, and they'll help guide. But everything is all about how can we make things a bit more inclusive, more accessible. That is like very key in how I approach design. So as far as answering that, like it's really about just working with external teams and internal teams, developing surveys, systems, so that we can start speaking to those audiences, developing those baseline metrics so that we can start to measure and see our results in year over year. So yeah, like diversity, inclusion, and accessibility in brand, et cetera, like that's an ongoing challenge. I don't think anyone has solved, but it just takes being it's actually having that effort and putting in the work to get it done. So yeah, it's ongoing. I don't know if I really answered your question, but that was a good one.
All right. And from Lonnie, any advice for someone with 15 years of visual brand experience pivoting into the UX world?
Oh wow, that's amazing. First of all, congratulations on 15 years. That's a huge milestone, and then also making that pivot. You'd be surprised, having 15 years of brand experience, having 15 years of experience, 10 years of experience in any discipline. You already have that muscle memory. You already understand process. You already understand, working with people. Those to me are the principles that you really need to grasp. If you understand how to work with people, how to communicate, how to plan, those are going to be the key elements that's going to help you make that transition. Now, learning the actual tactical, the principles, some of the best practices, those things will come, but it's really just attaching yourself to a great organization, really being a great listener. Like, again, I mentioned, listen, really learn as much as you can, but just go for it. Like there's no need to be shy about it. I mean, like, just like you're going to continue to grow and evolve, but I think it's amazing.
All right. Last question here. Would the presentation shown today be available? We are going to post the video of this. I dropped the YouTube channel in the chat earlier today. We'll also be posting the video up to our UX Vancouver, UXD Chicago, Web Dev Chicago channels as well later this week. And I don't know if you're asking specifically if you would share the deck. That's really up to Matthew if he's open to that. So
yeah, totally. I can share it. I can share a PDF.
Okay. Yeah, then we'll drop a link to that in the channel as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of mentorship and giving advice. And so I'm one of those, like, if you have a question for me, I am on Twitter at mbarnesart. I am happy to answer any question, share any insights. Like, I really believe in paying it forward. So let me know.
Excellent. Wow. We really appreciate you speaking with us today, Matthew, bringing us your insights, your wonderful presentation. I really appreciate everyone that joined us today. Thank you so much for coming out. And we'll hopefully see you all soon at a future event. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and hopefully it was helpful. So yeah, cheers.